So I am super excited to talk about this cartoon in this video because this is another cartoon from Nickelodeon that I absolutely enjoyed watching as a kid. And I've already talked about 4 out of the 5 Nickelodeon shows that I made a video on a little while ago on the channel, because I've already made a video talking about SpongeBob, I already made a video talking about Jimmy Neutron and Fairly Odd Parents, and I've already made a video talking about the Rugrats, and the other cartoon that was included in that video was Danny Phantom. So it was only a matter of time before I decided to make a video on that. But I absolutely loved the show. I was so addicted to it. And one of the things that I remember the most watching the show was the theme song, like Danny Phantom, he's Phantom. Like, how can you not get addicted to a theme song like that? Like, one of the things that you gotta know, like when you're making a cartoon show, you gotta have a banger theme song. Like Fairly Odd Parents had a banger theme song. Jimmy Neutron had a banger theme song. SpongeBob had a banger theme song. Rugrats, just had like some music in the background, but it's still memorable. And then of course you got Danny Phantom with that theme song that's just so catchy, it just gets stuck in your head. And you just gotta have like a theme song that like really gets the viewer like invested in it. We're like, oh god, I gotta go on YouTube and just listen to this again. I gotta put it on loop. Like the Danny Phantom song was just so addicting. But I just wanted to make this video giving my overall thoughts on the series because I absolutely love this show so much. Like, Nickelodeon had a lot of banger shows, so I'm glad that I grew up in the era where all of these cartoons were coming out. So I'm just super excited to express my love for Danny Phantom in this video. So if you guys have anything that you want to talk about when it comes to the Danny Phantom series, be sure to let me know, as always, in the comment section down below, because I would absolutely love to hear it. So one of the first things I do want to talk about when it comes to the Danny Phantom series is I want to talk about how this show has a nice blend of the superhero action and of course the teenage humor that we get in the show. Because when it comes to superhero action, I love that. I love seeing all the different kinds of action sequences that we get in the show. I like seeing like all the fights break out when it comes to all the enemies that Danny made throughout the span of the Danny Phantom series. So I always loved that because that reminded me of Spider-Man. Growing up as a kid, I absolutely love Spider-Man. I still do to this day, but it reminded me of Spider-Man, seeing Spider-Man go up against the Green Goblin, seeing Spider-Man go up against Doc Ock or Venom or Sandman or Carnage or whatever villain that Spider-Man had to run into. It just reminded me of that because Danny Phantom just had like a lot of cool action sequences, and then when you mix his powers in it, because it's like always cool to really see how Danny utilizes his ghost powers as he's fighting these different kinds of villains within the series. It's just so entertaining to watch. And then of course you have like the teenage humor where you can actually see them act their age, and you could see like a lot of people relating to that. Like obviously around that time I wasn't a teenager, I was still a young kid, but around that time a lot of people that were around that age that were watching this cartoon or could at least acknowledge like what sort of humor they were trying to go for in the show. It's really nice to look at it like that because it's nice to have like a balance where the show isn't like too serious, where you can have like those nice wholesome moments, those funny moments throughout the show that keeps the show like very engaging for the viewer. So that's definitely like one of the things that I absolutely loved about Danny Phantom, and it's something that I could always look back at and remember when I was watching each and every single one of these Danny Phantom episodes. And another thing that I do want to mention in this show as well is I loved seeing how Danny had to keep his identity hidden from his friends and family, because that's also a very relatable experience, because it's almost like looking at what Peter Parker went through during the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies, where Peter Parker had to keep his identity hidden from Mary Jane, had to keep his identity hidden from his best friend Harry Osborn, had to keep his identity hidden from his aunt and other villains that he came across as well, so they didn't know who he actually was. Because looking at Spider-Man as a character, he has to balance his life as Peter Parker and Spider-Man, where when you're in the world of Spider-Man, you're fighting crime, you're going up against villains like Green Goblin and Doc Ock and Carnage, because you want to eventually stop them from doing all of their evil plans. And then when it comes to Peter Parker, that's your regular life. That's you delivering pizzas because it's pizza time. That's you spending some quality time with Mary Jane because that's your girlfriend. That's you hanging out with your buddy Harry Osborn because that's your best friend. That's you spending some quality time with your aunt at home because, you know, Aunt May is somebody that you're very close to. She's the only person that you have in your life, and you want to make sure that you spend quality time with her because you love her and you want to make sure that she's taken care of at all times. And that's kind of how it is with Danny Phantom, where it's like, yes, his friends know his identity, but at the same time, you know, when it comes to like family and other people, he keeps it hidden from them because he doesn't want it to be like a similar situation with Peter Parker, where it's like, oh, if people know who he actually is, then they're going to end up targeting people that he's close to. And that's like a risk when it comes to being a superhero, is if people actually know who you are, like if your identity's out there, they're going to try targeting the people that are close to you because they're going to want to, you know, use that against you to see if they can get anything out of you, or they could see you just admit defeat so they can eventually put an end to you once and for all. So that was very interesting to see throughout the Danny Phantom series, because it's definitely like a very relatable thing. Because if I had to make an example for myself, you know, I'm known as a person outside of YouTube where I have my own personal life, I have my job, I have my friends and family, and I do things with all of them. And then when it comes to YouTube, obviously I'm still the same person, you know, expressing all my thoughts about all the things I love, but I'm going as DropThisBox. I'm making all these different kinds of videos, giving my thoughts on all the things that I love, and connecting with all of you guys so we can talk about all the things that we have in common. So I love seeing that from Danny Phantom because it made him relatable as a character, and it also humanized him as well, because it's not like he's just a one-dimensional character. He actually has two separate lives. Instead of just being Danny Phantom, he's also Danny Fenton as well. So one of the other things I do want to talk about is obviously when it comes to any cartoon, like when it comes to like the big baddie in it, like you got Plankton from SpongeBob, for example, or you have like Mr. Crocker from the Fairly Odd Parents, you always have like a group of villains within that show that try to cause a lot of mischief, try to cause like a whole bunch of destruction within the show so they can, you know, get the hero like all fired up to go after them and stop them for all the evil plans that they're doing. Danny Phantom had a lot of memorable villains. Like if I had to give a few examples to mention two of them, you also had Vlad and Ember, because you had Vlad, who was a very interesting character, especially with his relationship with Danny Phantom, and you see like the complexity with Vlad's character, and he had a very compelling backstory which got you really invested in the character. And you also see Ember as well. You're getting insight on her, how she became who she was, and what led her down the direction to make all these different kinds of decisions. And then you include like, you know, the sassiness of the character, just showing off the character's personality. That was one of the things I loved about Danny Phantom the most, because it added layers to a lot of these characters. And that's one of the things I like when I get invested in a series, when I want to understand the characters, understand their motivations, understanding their personality and all their character traits. I want to know like who they are as people. I don't want somebody to be like one-dimensional, where it's like, okay, that's just what they are and that's all there is to it. Like, I want to learn more about these characters. I want to be invested in these characters. Like, even though they're villains, I want to feel for the villains. I want to understand their motivations and what sort of things that they're getting themselves into as I'm watching the show. And Danny Phantom did a really good job at that, and that's something that I can definitely acknowledge from the show. And I also really enjoyed watching Danny's powers evolve throughout the show, because it's not like just Danny phasing through walls. Like, you actually see Danny's powers evolve throughout the show. Like, you have him doing that screech that he does, and then you also see him doing like these different kinds of blasts that he displayed throughout the show as well. Just to give a few examples, it's nice to see Danny develop these different kinds of powers as you're watching the show, because obviously no one wants to watch the entire show where he's just doing the exact same powers that we've seen ever since we watched the very first episode of the series. Like, we obviously want to see how Danny evolves when it comes to the powers that he developed, and we want to see if there's like any new abilities that end up showing up later down the road, so we can get some insight on them. We can see Danny train, we can see Danny understand how to utilize those abilities. That was also, you know, a very cool thing to see, because it's almost like, you know, looking at a superhero understanding their powers for the very first time when they unlock them. Like, if I had to give an example, when it came to My Hero Academia, you had that series where all of these kids ended up developing quirks at a certain age, And at first they didn't really understand their quirks. It was really difficult for them to understand how to utilize it to its full extent. But then after a while, as they learn to train with those abilities, they start to understand the quirk a lot better and they can utilize it more. And then as they progress even further with their new abilities, they can end up unlocking new ones so they can utilize their quirk a lot better. That's just me giving an example with Danny Phantom, where it's like, okay, I don't really understand this ability, but I'm going to keep working on it so I can understand it a lot more. So then once I master it, I can add it to my arsenal. So it could be a very useful ability if I'm fighting like all these different kinds of enemies coming my direction. I will understand how to utilize these abilities in full so they could be very useful when I'm using all these different kinds of abilities. And another thing I really enjoyed as well is seeing the show's themes of friendship and loyalty, especially when it comes to Danny and Sam's relationship, because you see throughout the show their friendship is built on trust and they have mutual support for one another, which is always a great thing to have, especially when it comes to a life that Danny Phantom has or a life that Sam has. It's very nice to see how they're able to display the relationship so we can see how it evolves over time throughout the show, and we could see, you know, how close they are for one another, because that's one of the things you got to know. Like when you're friends with somebody, when you're like best friends and you could tell that friend everything, it's nice that you could always rely on that friend, and if you tell them a secret, you know that they can trust that person with that secret. Because like I mentioned earlier in the video, Danny, when it came to his secret identity, he couldn't let just anybody know that, but considering how he's close to his friend like Sam, for example, he's gonna tell her because he can trust her, and he knows that if it came down to it, she wouldn't spill the beans when it came to anything. Like if somebody was trying to look for him, she wouldn't say anything at all. But that was a really good thing to see between Dan, Sam, and Tucker throughout the series as you were watching the show. But Danny Phantom as a whole, it just gave me a very good experience growing up as a kid, because shows like this don't really come around that often. So I'm really glad that when it came to like the early 2000s, I was around in that area to watch these shows growing up and just experience them in full, because it's just nice to like look back at it and be like, oh my God, you know, those are the shows that I grew up with as a kid and they were very memorable. I can always look back at them and just be like, damn, I had a really good childhood watching all of these banger cartoons growing up. So I'm just super excited to call myself a fan of Danny Phantom, and I'm honestly happy that Danny Phantom as a show existed in the first place so I can experience the show in full and just look back at all of the great moments that I've had with this series overall. But other than that, that's honestly all I have to really say in this video. So I'm really curious to hear you guys' thoughts on this. Like, how do you guys feel about Danny Phantom as a whole? What are your favorite characters when it comes to all of the different kinds of characters in Danny Phantom? What is your favorite moment? What is your favorite episode? What is your overall thoughts on Danny Phantom as a whole? Be sure to let me know, as always, in the comment section down below, because I would absolutely love to hear it. And if you guys enjoy this video, be sure to like, subscribe, really appreciate it. And if you guys want to follow your boy on social media, be sure to check out my Facebook page, my Twitter, my Instagram, and my TikTok. All of that is located in the description below. Make sure to click on the bell for notifications so you guys are notified whenever I upload a video on the channel. But other than that, I hope all of you guys are having a fantastic day, whatever the day may be, if it's a daytime, the nighttime, or the evening. And I'll see you guys in the next video. As always, peace out.